This video presents a simulation in which key stakeholders use Smartsettle Infinity to co-create a Myanmar mini Marshall Plan. Smartsettle Infinity is a decision support tool. It does not replace human agency or judgment. The outcomes shown here depend on the willingness of real-world actors to engage constructively in a peace process. For the purposes of the simulation, the stakeholders were organized into these 6 groups. The Myanmar Tatmadaw military, the current regime. Arakan Army, one of the most prominent among dozens of ethnic armed organizations. National Unity Government, a democratic resistance coalition. Rohingya camps and diaspora. Many remain displaced in Bangladesh. Regional and global actors, including countries with strategic or economic interests in Myanmar's future, such as China, India, the United States, and Qatar. And civil society organizations, critical for long-term transformation. Myanmar's conflict, among the world's most protracted and complex, is rooted in a deep political divide. The Tatmadaw has ruled for decades, resisting reforms toward inclusive representative governance. Ethnic armed organizations continue to demand autonomy, cultural recognition, and political rights, often excluded from peace talks. The 2021 coup reignited violence and eroded trust, drawing international condemnation. Millions have been displaced internally and across borders, many lacking access to basic needs. The outcome in Myanmar will have ripple effects across South and Southeast Asia, shaping regional security, migration, and economic development. This makes Myanmar one of the most urgent challenges for peacebuilders today. In the refugee camps of Bangladesh, nearly 1 million Rohingya survivors live in precarious conditions. Makeshift shelters stretch across hillsides, packed tightly in sprawling settlements. Despite international support, these camps offer little hope for the future. Stateless and marginalized, the Rohingya face extreme barriers to return, integration, or resettlement. Any peace-building plan for Myanmar must address these realities, not only as a matter of justice, but as a foundation for stability across the entire region. Across Myanmar, armed conflict has driven over 2 million people from their homes. In Rakhine State and beyond, military operations, ethnic persecution, and systemic violence have triggered waves of displacement. Entire communities have been uprooted, many living for years in overcrowded camps with limited access to healthcare, education, or opportunity. This humanitarian crisis is not a byproduct of war, it is central to it. Without addressing these conditions, there can be no sustainable peace. Seen from a distance, the conflict resembles many others, a power struggle tug of war. When imagined between just 2 parties, say Tatmadaw and the pro-democracy coalition, it seems like a zero-sum contest. Either Tatmadaw wins or pro-democracy wins. But really, both sides lose. Worse still, all parties might get stuck in a one-dimensional distributive stalemate, where all sides losing is even more obvious. This is the current status quo. In game theory, it's called a Nash equilibrium, where each actor does what seems best for themselves, but the collective result is suboptimal. In Myanmar, this is not just inefficient, it's dangerous. John Nash, who earned a Nobel Prize for defining this, also proposed a way out: maximize the utility product. It reframes the problem from one-dimensional win-lose to a 2-dimensional integrative space where both parties can gain. Now Tatmadaw seeks the right, pro-democracy seeks the top, and mutual gain becomes possible. This concept, integrative negotiation, applies to any number of parties. When we analyze the preferences of these parties, another boundary appears: the efficiency frontier, representing the best possible outcomes given everyone's interests. When we also plot the status quo positions of the parties, the bounded area defines the zone of possible agreement. It might be small at first, especially after decades of entrenched hostility. But the good news is that transformation is possible. As trust builds and new possibilities are explored, the zone of possible agreement can grow. And this shift is possible for all 6 stakeholder groups. So, how big is the ZOPA now? The economic case for peace in Myanmar is compelling. Our simulation groups benefits into 3 categories. Recovery of lost GDP, around $12 billion a year once normal economic activity resumes. Reduced military expenditures, $3 to $5 billion a year in savings. Avoided destruction costs, infrastructure, displacement, productivity, $5 to $7 billion a year. Combined, these yield about $22 billion a year in gains. Using a conservative 20% discount rate, reflecting Myanmar's risk environment, this translates to a present value of $110 billion, a transformative incentive for peace investment. Financing peace is a shared responsibility. In this simulation, we propose that international donors contribute half of the funding, with the remainder shared among Myanmar's stakeholders. The Tatmadaws' share reflects its control over national resources, while the NUG draws from public crowdfunding. Civil society, ethnic groups, and Rohingya communities make smaller, symbolic contributions. In a real negotiation, this funding responsibility would be part of the overall agreement, negotiated alongside all other terms. So, now that we've got that sorted out, how do we make it happen? Transformation that motivates collaboration is the key. The Smartsettle process is powered by 9 intelligent algorithms, what we call predictive AI. These algorithms generate packages likely to be accepted by all sides. We'll show them in action shortly, but first we must introduce the early part of the process where most transformation occurs: co-creating the single negotiating framework. The single negotiating framework is a shared draft agreement that outlines all the issues. This phase focuses on identifying common ground. Disagreements are noted and set aside for structured resolution later. Facilitated by skilled mediators and guided by AI, the framework evolves through iterative collaboration. In this simulation, the Myanmar Mini Marshall Plan includes 11 issue categories, from a ceasefire agreement to economic development and environmental reform. Each category contains multiple possible outcomes, representing the interests of all 6 stakeholder groups. This approach contrasts sharply with traditional issue-by-issue negotiation. Here, everything is on the table, documented and well-structured. And as Charles Kettering once said, this well-defined problem could already be half solved. Once the framework is mature and transformation has prepared the parties for the bargaining stage, each of these parties moves to their own private location. We will be viewing the simulation strictly from the point of view of the Tatmadaw. This is the private point of view of the Tatmadaw military, where they model their own preferences and prepare for bargaining. Private preferences are kept confidential by the system. The negotiating range on each issue here is oriented so that the options most preferred by the Tatmadaw are on the right-hand side. For example, on the cost issue, the Tatmadaw prefers the lower end of the range. On their share of the costs, the Tatmadaw have assigned 20 importance points to the negotiating range from 0 to 2 billion, so that 1 point is worth approximately $100 million. This establishes the importance scale for all the other issues. Behind each issue is a satisfaction function, showing how that party becomes satisfied on that issue. The non-linear shape of the curve here indicates that it becomes more difficult for the Tatmadaw to pay as the amount increases. The most important issue, worth 43 points, is ceasefire agreement and security guarantees. The ceasefire satisfaction graph shows 6 alternative outcomes, ranked by the Tatmadaw. Included among the options is the status quo, which has been set to 0. Their least preferred option, scoring -10, is disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Several other options are much better, with the most preferred option being inclusive national ceasefire at 33 points. Power sharing and governance, and inclusive legal status and return of displaced persons are also among the most important issues. On the right side is where the Tatmadaw keep track of alternative outcomes. There is nothing yet on the table for all parties to see. The Tatmadaw have created 5 privately named reference packages to help them understand their own preferences, and also for use in the bargaining phase about to begin. The ratings of these packages are determined by the individual ratings assigned to the options that make up the package. Among these reference packages, the one least preferred to the Tatmadaw, worth 0 points, is named status quo. Any outcome worth 0 or less would be totally unacceptable. However, the Tatmadaw actually walk away from the table before accepting anything worse than their walkaway package worth 29 points. Their goal is a solution worth at least 65 points. While the package named Target would be quite acceptable to the Tatmadaw, they decide to start by proposing an optimistic package. Since the initial proposals of the other parties are all waiting at the neutral site to be revealed simultaneously, we see them all at once. Among those proposals, the one submitted by the National Unity Government, worth 73 points to the Tatmadaw, looks quite good, but the Tatmadaw are not yet ready to accept this package. Instead, they request Infinity to generate a suggestion. Several suggestions appear, and the Tatmadaw accept all those worth more than their planned concession. Each time they accept a package, a yellow dot appears, but only to the Tatmadaw. Other parties remain unaware of which packages the Tatmadaw has endorsed. At this point, the Tatmadaw decide to end Session 1. Smartsettle will declare an agreement if, at the end of a session, all parties have accepted the same package. Unfortunately, no agreement is reached in Session 1. In Session 2, the Tatmadaw propose their concession package. The other parties, seeing this signal, choose to submit theirs as well. This unfolds rapidly in this simulation, but would take more time in a real-world negotiation. The Tatmadaw inspect each of these and accept all packages worth more than their own concession. The Tatmadaw now decide to also propose their target package, but they do so in secret. This is done by publishing the package anonymously. In this way, the target package is disguised as a typical suggestion. This strategic move is known as a masquerade. This technique helps bypass bias that might otherwise block agreement. The Tatmadaw are thrilled when they see the yellow dot on package 2 turn green. This means that all parties had accepted at least one common package. Smartsettle recognizes this overlap and declares a baseline agreement. The excitement is palpable when the Tatmadaw realize that their target expectations have been surpassed. However, with their training on Infinity's ability to uncover hidden value, the Tatmadaw request an improvement. With approval from the other parties, Smartsettle generates package 23, which becomes the final agreement after all parties confirm that it is even better than the baseline. This moment highlights the transformative power of the Smartsettle Infinity process, uniting parties and achieving surprising outcomes beyond their expectations. The improvement is worth 20 points more to the Tatmadaw than the baseline agreement. And in fact, if we were to also view this negotiation from each other party's perspective, we would see that the improvement was worth a grand sum of $18 billion over the baseline. When Tatmadaw's overall benefit of $9.3 billion is combined with the benefits of all stakeholders, the sum comes to $111 billion. This final optimized consensus, the result of transformative dialogue, represents a comprehensive Marshall Plan that the parties wish to implement, formalized by fully resolving the single negotiating framework. The key lesson at this stage is not the specific outcome we've shown you, but rather the consensus-building process, which can be applied not only in Myanmar, but in many other places. To emphasize that point, let's review that process. This animation illustrates the Smartsettle process in satisfaction space for two parties, the Tatmadaw, which aims to maximize gains to the right, and the pro-democracy coalition, which prefers the top. No party will accept something worse than the status quo. That point is labeled 0, 0. That's the Nash equilibrium. After transformation, the extended zone of possible agreement is revealed to Smartsettle's neutral site. Each party also has a minimum threshold. These levels define the zone of likely agreement. Smartsettle encourages parties to start with optimistic proposals. These are somewhat ambitious, but still help to narrow the bargaining ranges. Smartsettle then generates suggestions between these proposals. Packages that exceed target levels become candidates for a baseline agreement. The final step is an optimized fair solution using our signature algorithm: maximize the minimum gain. This is how we escape the dangerous equilibrium and reach a just, efficient, and fair resolution. This process applies to nearly any formal negotiation, with any number of parties. In a negotiation with more parties, the frontier becomes a surface, then a volume, then a hypervolume. Incredibly complex to negotiate, but with Smartsettle, that complexity remains hidden, managed entirely by the system. Each participant focuses only on their own goals and preferences. But what we're most interested in is the volume under the efficiency frontier. Our simulation confirmed the potential benefits of peace very close to our earlier estimate of $110 billion. With an estimated cost of $6.7 billion, the benefit-cost ratio is 17. There should be no hesitation to move forward with this plan, here and everywhere. Consider this. The amount of money the world spends on peacemaking is minuscule compared to the costs of war. Redirect just 1/4 of that, and we could fully fund all of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, with trillions to spare. Imagine what more we could accomplish. This is more than just technology. It's about cultivating the will to collaborate and transform conflict into consensus. Our Track 2 simulations are designed to inform and accelerate Track 1 peace processes, offering decision-makers a clear, data-driven path forward. We invite stakeholders, funders, and policy leaders to partner with us in bringing this proven approach to scale. Peace in Myanmar could become a global template, replicable in other conflict zones. Thanks for watching.